What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this, I'm going to break down what's going on with Tesla stock and what you should be watching for going forward. I'm also going to talk about what's going on with SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and many different tickers from a technical standpoint, and also what the news is saying about Tesla in the markets. I'm going to talk about the data that's dropping tomorrow morning, when the data is coming out, and how it could affect the markets, and also what the data is saying about Tesla and SPY for tomorrow. But before I break anything down with all this information, before I talk about the technicals and what's going on with Tesla, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And finally, don't forget about the Moomoo link. The offer ends very soon. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks with a $100 cash reward. The offer ends in just 1 day, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, Tesla's up 0.49% for the day. It was actually red throughout the majority of the day. We saw Tesla selling off after some news about Cathie Wood selling over $7 million worth of Tesla shares. And also because other analysts were giving Tesla some negative ratings, downgrading Tesla once again. Tesla sold off after all that news came out, but it managed to hold above the 50 EMA, so it was still showing some strength. Then at the very end of the day, the market got a nice push up after one of the Fed speakers known as Bostic came out and he said that he believes the Fed is done raising rates and that the Fed is most likely going to just keep rates high up for like a couple of years before they start to pivot and etc. And he believes that that's most likely what's going to happen, which is the direct opposite of what Jerome Powell was saying about how there are going to be more rate hikes. So that's why the market performed the way it did. That's why the market got a very nice push at the very end of the day. And you could argue manipulation played a role as well. But for now, we're just going to say that. And now the real question is, how is Tesla going to perform tomorrow and what data is coming out? Let's first talk about the news and all these things very briefly before I break down the charts for Tesla and SPY and etc. Looking at the market, we had Nike's earnings that just came out. This is the final major earnings for the entire week. So right here for Thursday, Nike just came out. And then for Nike, they actually ended up doing pretty decent, very mixed earnings overall. They missed on EPS just barely, but they beat on revenue. Quite mixed. Guidance wasn't that great. It was just kind of mixed too. And as a result, we saw Nike go from green to red, but we're going to see what happens by tomorrow. But for now, this was pretty decent overall. I wouldn't say it was too bad. I wouldn't say it was too great, just in the middle. When it comes to tomorrow, however, we have some more data that's dropping. We have the PCE report that's coming out. This is going to be very important. PCE is coming out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 1 hour before the market opens. So please be ready for this, especially for core PCE data. The Fed has been talking about this, and they're saying that this is a little bit too sticky, and this is why Jerome Powell is still remaining as hawkish as he has been. So this is going to be very important to watch core, especially year over year and month over month. It's all dropping at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. I will talk about this in the morning. Then after this, after the market is open, then 15 minutes after open at about 9:45 a.m., we have the Chicago PMI report coming out. This will give us another gauge of how the economy is doing, so watch that carefully. Then at about 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time, we have the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Report. And then we have the 5-year inflationary expectations report all coming out. This is all going to be very important at about 10 o'clock a.m. So make sure you watch all of this data. This will affect the markets too. The market's going to be affected once again before the market opens by PCE. Then 15 minutes after the market opens at about 9:45 by PMI, and then at 10 o'clock a.m. by the Michigan Consumer Sentiment Reports and Inflationary Expectations Reports. So all this data is dropping. Make sure you watch this carefully. This will affect how the market moves during the start of tomorrow. And let me just say that PCE is going to come out for the month of May. When CPI came out for May, this data was pretty decent and the market ended up kind of liking it. But the only problem with the report was core CPI was a little bit on the hotter end. It was a little bit hot. It was very close to expectations. It was basically at expectations, but a little bit on the hotter side. So that's not what the market wanted, and that's not what the Fed wants. So we're going to be very careful with PCE. PCE is most likely going to be decent, but core, I'm not too sure about core, so we're going to be watching this carefully. If it's a little bit too hot, above 4.7%, the market may not like it. If it's low, the market could like it. But I just wanted to say, at least for tomorrow, just be prepared for all of this. Now for the news affecting Tesla, just briefly, XPeng has launched a $29,000 coupe SUV in China, which is going to be giving Tesla a run for its money. I do agree with that to some degree because there's going to be more competition continuing in China, but I also disagree because you have to remember that Tesla has a very strong brand, and they're still projected to be giving us an all-time high deliveries amount in China for this quarter. So I still believe Tesla's brand is extremely strong. Tesla is going to once again continue to grow, and their brand, the power of their brand, they're so well known because of it, and they're very decent customer service. I believe this is going to still help Tesla continue to grow, and I don't really see this slowing Tesla down. I think they're going to keep growing in China regardless. I'm still very excited for their future deliveries. But to really know if this is going to affect Tesla a lot or not is just see how they do in China over the next couple of quarters. Now, on top of this, there was more news that came out about how Electrify America is the next big charging network to adopt Tesla's standard for the EV plug. And that's more very, very good news as more and more companies are joining in and adopting Tesla's charging cable. I think this is good news because this is going to help more and more investors and more companies gain exposure to Tesla. It's going to help bring in more revenue for Tesla as well from the charging side. And this is going to incentivize Tesla to continue to expand its charging network by giving it more resources, more money, more revenue, and etc. That is good news for Tesla. It makes me very excited for it moving forward. I can't wait for what the future holds. Now, I talked about this in the morning. I'm just going to quickly go over this again. Two pieces of news came out. One of them was the fact that many analysts came out again today and they said that Tesla is very, very overvalued and that caused Tesla to drop just a little bit. Then Kathy Wood from ARK or ARK, however you want to say it, she basically sold another $7.3 million worth of Tesla shares. Not a very, very insane amount. It's very modest, if anything. But this is worth noting because you have to consider how sentiment is going to shift because of this. This is why Tesla sold off a little bit. But it's not the end of the world because many of these hedge funds, many of these fund managers are going to be repositioning and putting more money into like the financial side near the end of this time of the year. I think more money is going to be going into banks and the financial side, so it's not really a big deal to me. It's very much a small amount. I don't see it as that big. And Kathy Wood does this all the time. I mean, she sold some just a few weeks ago too, and yet Tesla continued to pump. So it just goes to show that it does not necessarily mean that Kathy Wood is giving up on the company. It does not mean that Kathy Wood hates Tesla, like some people are insinuating right now. It just means that she likes to secure profits, especially before big events. She also likes to reposition. She's a fund manager anyways, and she also does this to hedge other positions possibly as well. So it can mean a lot of things. Don't really take it for what it may appear to be. And she's not necessarily hating on Tesla or disliking Tesla for that reason. Now, when it comes to their model listings, the Model X listing is still declining just a little bit, but the Model S, the Model Y, and the Model 3 still have relatively low values for their inventory levels. That's a pretty good sign for Tesla because that tells me we're seeing a big increase in sales right now because we're almost at the end of the quarter and we're approaching July. This is a good time for Tesla. Tesla is likely going to see a big increase in their sales, and this should improve their deliveries by the end of the quarter. Looking at this data, I think there's a good chance that Tesla is going to either meet expectations or beat expectations. I don't really see them missing. I think it's very unlikely they end up doing that. But just to be safe, we always have to see the numbers coming out on Sunday by the time we get more confirmation. Now, when it comes to the data coming out for Tesla, we're going to be watching what's happening here. Tesla is once again performing very similar to SPY right now. It's actually outperforming it to some degree also for the QQQ. And for now, the price price ratio is still elevated because Tesla is still performing like the market, still holding up quite nicely. It's not really tanking, it still has some relative strength. On top of this, Deutsche Bank was the last analyst to give a report just a couple of days ago, and they were saying to buy Tesla. Another analyst, which hasn't been updated yet on here, did say that you should sell Tesla. But besides that, not much else has come out. Tesla tends to do well during earnings, and we tend to see the share price increase during big events. And for Fridays, Tesla tends to be green only about 49% of the time. We tend to do better in June than July, and we tend to do a lot better during the second and fourth hours of the trading day historically. So just watch those hours very carefully. Finally, to add on to this, we saw a decrease in the short interest, which was no surprise as Tesla started pumping. We saw about 60 million Tesla shares shorted just a couple of days ago, and it dropped to about 50.6 million just 2 days ago. So once this data updates, we're going to find out more. The short interest is relatively high on Tesla right now. This tells me two possibilities. Either the shorts are going to be right about Tesla and it could end up dropping after, the big data comes out on Sunday, or we could see another massive short squeeze, which could cause Tesla to run another like $20 or $30 to the upside over the weekend. So it really depends on what the data tells us. Make sure you're ready for that. And finally, volume is slowing down just a little bit for now on Tesla. We had relatively low volume, but still it managed to close green, which shows that Tesla is gaining strength. It's still holding up nicely because there's not a whole lot of selling pressure to counteract the amount of buyers that are there. And this is what's helping Tesla hold up because there's not too many sellers right now. A lot of people are not selling, bringing the share price down. It's still holding up on low volume. Finally, when you look at the short volume relative to price, this is still kind of low, and this is a good sign because we're seeing a little bit less shorting, at least as of today. And that's a good sign because Tesla is not being manipulated as much to some degree. Now, going back, let's now talk about this data right here. We have a lot of puts expiring on SPY. Tomorrow we have about a 2.92 put to call ratio. Max pain is 435, and we have about 1.9 plus million puts expiring out of the money so far. And we have just under about like 700,000, maybe less than that, of the calls expiring. So it's very interesting to witness how many puts there are. That just so happen to be expiring. And I think the market makers are incentivized to hold us above 435 at the very least. They're not going to try to cause the market to crash below that. I really doubt that's going to happen. So there's a good chance the market's going to try to hold up, but this will depend a lot on what the data tells us. But for now, we're going to be watching the charts now, talk about what's going on with all these different levels. So for Tesla, this is what we're going to be watching for. On Tesla, we're looking pretty decent, but I want to go over both the bull and bear cases in an unbiased manner before I talk about what I think is going to happen. So if you're bullish on Tesla, okay, you're going to be watching this thing break 260. That's going to be the most important level on Tesla. If it breaks 260, it has the potential to push all the way up to this next resistance at 262.5, then potentially 266, and then 270 after that. If Tesla breaks down, hypothetically, you're going to be watching major support around this 254 level, around the 50 EMA on the 1 hour time frame. If it holds this level, you're going to be watching this, and it may be very close to like 255 by the time we get to tomorrow. So this is on an uptrend, and this is a moving average overall, and Tesla has been holding up above where it was quite a while ago. So it's no surprise if this does trend upwards. But then if it breaks below 255, watch 252.5, then potentially around 251.04, which is the 200 EMA. Then 250 is going to be the next major support. I don't really see Tesla dropping that hard unless something major happens, but we're just going to be careful. Now, the bears are going to argue there's a possible head and shoulders, but there's no guarantee it's going to play out. But what do I think is more likely for Tesla besides that possible technical? Well, you have to remember this, okay? I just went over the more bullish and bearish levels, but let me tell you what I think is more likely. When Tesla has big events, like huge events such as deliveries or like earnings, we tend to see Tesla hold up and start pushing to the upside. If you look at today, for example, Tesla was holding above the 50 very nicely, and it managed to hold up and close green yet again, despite Cathie Wood selling and all this bearish news. So Tesla is gaining some strength, if I would say anything. But my only concern would be, is there going to be more negative news from these analysts? They could try to slow Tesla down. But besides all of that, if we just look at the charts, if we look at the 1 hour time frame, there's a clear inverse head and shoulders like structure that is developing. And you could argue that Tesla has a lot of potential to be forming the final push to the upside to resistance, which would be this gap right over here. And that's going to take Tesla to about 266, but we need confirmation that would be a break above 260 to see it. If 266 breaks, we're going to be watching this thing test 270. If it gets above 270, I'm going to be watching this imbalance around 275. All right, so those are the levels to watch for. And I think there's a good chance it's going to be more bullish because that's what typically happens. But we have to be very careful because of all the data that's dropping. And also we need to watch for confirmation. So for confirmation of the bullish move, okay, watch this very carefully. Tesla tried to break out today. It failed. The level to watch for is going to be this 260 resistance. It's going to be very, very important. If it breaks 260, watch 262.5 around there as well. This entire zone is going to be important. If it clears this zone, it starts pushing up nicely. This thing has the potential to start flying to 266 to even like 270. And if it breaks that, 275 could come. I am leaning more in the direction that this thing is going to get above 260 for tomorrow. But I'm not going to be like way too fixated on just that. I want to be more objective. And when I say that, you have to watch for confirmation. So watch for 260 if we break this. That's going to be your confirmation. And Tesla's getting ready for a nice push up. Watch the direction, watch your technical indicators, and just be very careful because the stock is very manipulated and lots of these analysts are trying to bring this thing down. So just be very, very careful. Now, to add on to this, I think the market may play a role, but I think Tesla's looking quite primed. And historically, more than 80% of the time when there are massive events like deliveries, like earnings, and etc., we tend to see Tesla perform very well approaching the event. And especially on the day after, typically Tesla tends to pump. So there's a high probability Tesla's going to pump tomorrow. We're most likely going to see that. And I'm leaning more bullish, but I'm always prepared for anything just in case because of the manipulation and because of what these analysts are doing. I hope that's clear enough, okay? So just to make it clear, both a bull and bear case are possible. I'm always prepared for them, but I'm leaning more bullish because of history, because of the current trend, and because of this inverse head and shoulders pattern, how well Tesla held up today despite the negative news. I'm leaning the direction that Tesla's going to try to break 260. Get that confirmation. If you give it to me, this thing is going to likely fly all the way up to 252.5, and then, I'm sorry, 262.5. Sorry about that. Then potentially all the way up to 266 plus and maybe even 270 if we break those levels. And if 270 breaks, it could go all the way up to 275 in just one day. It's possible, but like I said before, watch for confirmation. Now, on SPY, how is this thing looking? Well, the bears are going to argue that, oh, this thing is once again holding up, but because it's a Friday, because there's all this manipulation and shorting, they could argue that, PC could cause a drop. And then if that's the case, you're going to be watching support at 438. If that fails us, the next major support is going to be at the 50 EMA, very close to the 436s. If that fails us, watch 434 as the next very major support at the 200 EMA. If we're bullish, you're going to be watching this thing hold above 438, break that. You're going to be seeing 439 for the gap fill, then 440 as the next major resistance. If that breaks, watch 442. And then after that, we have like 444 basically. This is looking like an inverse head and shoulder structure, so the odds are favoring the bulls, and this thing's continuing to make higher highs and higher lows. But Fridays do tend to be manipulated because of all of the options expiring, especially because of shifts with the 0-day to expiration options, because there could be shifts in the hedging that happens that causes more nuances to the price action. For that reason, I'm very open-minded on SPY. I'm very, very unbiased right now. I'm not leaning like way too far in either direction, but I do want to note that based off this trend, it's a little bit more likely, it is more probable, okay, that this is going to continue pushing. I'm going to be unbiased when I trade this, but it's more likely that this is going to push to the upside looking at the current trend from a technical standpoint. Look at the inverse head and shoulders, the higher highs and higher lows being made, and no true sign of this thing breaking down. So there's a good chance it's going to go for this gap fill and make its way all the way up to about 440. But just watch it carefully and see how it reacts to resistance just to be safe, and watch all the data that's dropping for tomorrow from PCE and etc. Looking at the QQQ, this thing has a potential inverse head and shoulders like structure. Once again, looking more bullish. There's a chance Tesla could help this thing pump up because Tesla will most likely pump, but I'm always open-minded just in case. If this thing does end up pushing to the upside, it has this very, very nice looking structure right here for this test of resistance. If we see this thing test 366 to 366.5, it has to break above 364 first. If we get those moves, if it breaks this resistance, it's going to fly all the way up to about 368 and potentially 370. And then there's also 372 if that breaks, because that's where the previous high was. Now, if it fails to do so, you're going to be watching support around 363.5. That's where the 50 EMA is. If that fails, watch this thing go all the way down to about 363. If that fails, there's 362, which is the 200 EMA. And if that fails us, watch this thing come all the way down very close to about 360 and potentially around 357.5. So I'm watching both levels. I am leaning a little bit more bullish looking at this inverse head and shoulder structure and looking at how it's holding up quite nicely still. But just to be safe, always be unbiased and watch the data for tomorrow. That could impact how the market opens. I'm simply just talking about the technicals looking more bullish. The market is going to be heavily impacted by the data dropping from PMI to PCE and etc. So watch that carefully and we will go on from there. So with all of that said, I'm now going to talk about the other tickers, but be very, very brief with them. When it comes to AMD, this thing is looking pretty decent for me. It's trying to hold above the 50 EMA on the 1 hour time frame to turn very bullish. It needs to break above this like 114 level. If it gets that break above the 200 EMA, that's going to be very bullish. And we have this imbalance way up here. Let me show you where it is. Right here, there's this imbalance around like 118. It's going to push all the way up there as a bullish divergence right here, and has this nice accumulation phase that's forming from a Wyckoff standpoint, and it's looking quite nice. If it breaks to 200, I'm going to be watching this thing go all the way up to 118. If it fails to break above the 200 EMA, then the next support zone is going to be around the 50 EMA at around this 110 area. If 110 fails us, watch 108, potentially 105 after that. But I am leaning a little bit more bullish on AMD for the time being looking at this bullish divergence that started forming. But just to be safe, watch the levels carefully. NEO may perform just like Tesla because it has support right now around 9.25. And if that fails us, there's $9, 8.95 as well, which is the 200 DMA, and also around 8.75. If it turns bullish, watch this thing test resistance around 9.6, 9.75, and then $10. I am leaning direction that NEO might remain green tomorrow. I think it may try to close green because of deliveries. I don't know when it's going to be releasing deliveries, though. It may be as soon as tomorrow because it depends on when the end of the month is on China in Chinese time, but it could happen over the weekend just like Tesla. So I'm not 100% sure just yet. I think it's going to be over the weekend, but just to be safe, there's going to be good expectations for delivery, so it may continue to hold up with Tesla. Looking at Netflix, this thing is trying to hold and bounce above the 50 EMA. If it holds above this support at 427.57, it's going to make its way all the way up to about 430. If it breaks that, watch this thing make its way closer to about 435, 437, 437.75, then potentially 440. If it breaks below the 50 tomorrow, depending on the data and etc., watch support at 427.57. Below that, it's going to make its way down to about 425, then 423.5. Then after that, it's going to come down to about 420, then 416. So watch those levels very carefully. It all depends on the data. I can't really predict it perfectly, but I am leaning the direction that this thing might bounce off the 50 EMA and try to hold it for the time being because it's showing some strength there for now. It may depend on the news too, but for now, I'm just going to try to be unbiased. Looking at the NASDAQ, this thing is trying to hold above the 50. If you're bearish on the NASDAQ, you're going to want to watch this thing break below the 50. So far, it has not done that. It is about to get a bearish cross on the PPO, but that's not a guarantee of anything just yet because, like I said before, we're going to see what happens with tech tomorrow. If it breaks below the 50, that's your bearish signal. This thing may start sinking all the way down to like 13,490 or even below that. If this thing starts to break the high it made right here in this range, it has the potential to push all the way up to where this unfilled gap is, to about this 13,660 plus level. It's about 13,700. It has the potential to do that as we have an inverse head and shoulder structure. So I am leaning a little bit more bullish on this, but just to be safe, always watch the data. As I said before, same thing with SPX. It's looking a little bit more bullish and has this gap. It looks like it really wants to go for that gap around the 4400s. But just to be safe, if you want to turn bullish, you need to see this hold above the 50 EMA at the very least. To turn bearish, you need to see it break below it at 4,371. If it breaks below that, this thing could start sinking down to like 4360 or even 4350. If it keeps pumping, if it breaks this high of the day, basically this like, what is that? The 40 base. It's basically 4,400. It has a gap all the way up here. It's about 44, like 10 around there. We could see it come all the way up there if it does continue to push, and I think the odds favor that. And if it does break this, we could see an attempt to try to break this high. It is a possibility, but just to be safe, watch this gap as resistance as well, that 4,400 area. The VIX is not telling us much for now, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. The SQQQ has a potential head and shoulders like formation. If this does play out, this could be a bullish signal for the NASDAQ, but just to be safe, it's not really giving us enough confirmation, so I'm not going to say too much about it. But it's very likely that this could play out on my SQQQ. For now, it's looking kind of weak, so there's a good chance it may play out, and that could be because of the market pumping. But just to be safe, I mean, it is kind of like stuck right below the 50 EMA, kind of hovering around it, so I'm not seeing too much just yet. I would lean a little bit more bearish on the SQQQ just to be safe. It is looking more in that direction, but like I said before, wait for confirmation, see if it breaks below like 19, and then we're going to see an 18 test. For Coinbase, it's looking a little bit more bearish to me. We have this potential structure where it's losing momentum, but there's also this imbalance down here around like the 68 level. It formed like a double top here. It could reject and come all the way down to 69.44, then 68. I am leaning more in that direction, but if it manages to break above 74, it's going to likely push all the way up to about 76.5 plus. For now, I'm leaning a little bit more bearish, looking at the MACD and looking at the fact that it formed a double top and it is losing some momentum right here. Like if you compare momentum to like right here, it could cool off. I would be leaning more towards like 68 as a target, maybe by next week. But just to be safe, it could hold up with the market in the beginning and then cool off by next week. So I just wanted to note that Alibaba is looking kind of weak. It is below 83 I'm sorry, it's at 83 right now. If it breaks below that, watch 82 flat and potentially 80 to be retested. There's no true sign of a bounce just yet, unless we get a bullish piece of news. But for now, it is still looking kind of weak. For Apple, if this thing wants to turn bullish, watch this thing break above 190. If it fails to do so, watch 188.6 as support, 187.5, 186.5, then 186. I just know these from the back of my head. To turn bullish, it has to break above 190. So far, it's trying to do so. It is holding up quite nicely, and we will see what happens tomorrow. It really depends on the data. It could slow down off PCE or not. Maybe it pumps off PCE. Who knows? If that's the case, it could just keep going. For Nvidia, if this thing wants to turn bullish, watch this thing break above, I think it's the 30-minute time frame is what I have to be looking at. Actually, it's below these important levels, but there is a possible inverse head and shoulders forming on Nvidia. So there's both a bull and bear case. Really just depends on the data. If you're bullish, watch it break above 410, 415, 418, then 420 to 421, then 425, and then 430. Basically, if you want to be bullish, if you're bearish, watch it break below 406. If it breaks that, it could try to invalidate this like inverse head and shoulders possibility and come all the way down to 401 to 400. Then after that comes 396 and 390. Right now, there's a possible inverse head and shoulders. A lot of investors and many of these options traders are going to notice this, so they may start buying calls and try to push this thing up. It's worth noting, so just watch that very carefully. I'm going to just check how I'm doing on time right now. I'm going to try to end this video very quickly, guys. So for Google, and once again for Nvidia, I just want to watch these levels carefully. We're going to see how it reacts to many of these. For Google, it's looking a little bit weak. It is below the 50. It wants to turn bullish. You have to watch it get above 121. If it does so, we could see this thing make its way up to about 124. If it fails to hold above 119, it's going to come all the way down to about 117. So watch that very carefully. It really depends on the data tomorrow. There's a good chance it could come down to about 117 because of that imbalance, but just to be safe, we will see how it reacts to these EMAs. Well, I'll be watching it tomorrow morning. For Amazon, if you're bullish, you want to see this thing get above 128 as of right now, and then if it breaks that, we could get closer to 130, 131.5, then 132.5. If it breaks below 127, watch support all the way down at 125 because we have this imbalance down at 125. So I'm going to be seeing 125 if 127 breaks as the next level. For Meta, if you're bullish on Meta, you're going to be wanting to see this thing break above 283. And then 284 after that. And then after that comes 286 and potentially 287.5, then 290. That's where you have major resistance on Meta. If it breaks down, watch 280, 277. And then after that comes 276, 275, 272.5, 270, then 269. I remember all the values. Watch those supports very carefully. For now, it is very close to where it could bounce off the 4-hour 50 EMA. So if it does bounce off this, that could be a very good sign. If it fails to do so, it is what it is. There's a good chance it's going to bounce off the 50 EMA because it tends to bounce off there on the 4-hour time frame. We're just going to watch this very carefully and see if it could get a bounce tomorrow. There's a good chance it's going to bounce tomorrow, but it depends a lot on the data dropping and how the market performs. So with that said, guys, I'm very unbiased on Tesla. I'm open to both the bullish and bearish cases. I am leaning more bullish, though, looking at the potential inverse head and shoulders forming, and also because of the fact that Tesla tends to pump right before big events. But always look at the news and always be careful as lots of data is dropping nonetheless. All right, guys, so thank you for listening. I'm hoping Tesla gets a break above 260. That's going to be our confirmation of the break to the upside. If Tesla does it, that's going to be a very good sign. I think Tesla could do it. I'm leaning in that direction. I think Tesla will try to get to at least 266. I hope for that, and that's what I am predicting. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. Tesla to the moon because the long term is very bright, and peace out.